And good evening, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of You Get What You Get. I'm Rick Hampton, along with my co-host Tree McDougal and Tim Turner, coming to you on a Tuesday evening. Hope everybody's having a fantastic day. Uh, got a great show planned tonight. We're going to be joined by the esteemed author and sports journalist David Steele, and have a great conversation about David's latest book. It was always a choice, picking up the baton of athlete activism. And David is going to give us some insight on what inspired him to write this book. And should be a great conversation. Tree, Tim, how you guys doing?
I'm doing great. I missed you guys last week.
It's been 2 weeks, and it was Valentine's Day last week, so
I'm sending you this Valentine.
Okay, go ahead, go more. We want more of that.
With hopes that you'll stay on my mind.
I was going to bring up the ocean.
Just a quick story about Michael Henderson, Detroiter.
Mm-hmm.
Got to see him about 2 years ago, put on a terrific show, and he performed at the Charles Wright Museum, downtown Detroit, which is just a spectacular place. It's the African American Museum, Charles Wright African American Museum. But he did the greatest thing. He stopped the show, and his high school music teacher was there. He asked him to stand up, and he thanked him for teaching him music, how to play the guitar, the love of music, and then got into the conversation how music and arts are being taken out of a lot of our public schools. Certainly an issue in Detroit. But he was like, man, I would never be on this stage without my high school music teacher. And I apologize for not remembering that gentleman's name. But I just became just a even bigger fan of Michael's after seeing that show and that gesture he made that night. And
That
of
is
course,
sweet.
we just lost him a few months ago.
Yeah. That is good when you can go back and then recognize those individuals who helped shape who you are. So, yeah, that's a pretty cool story.
Yeah, I would not be singing I'm sending you this Valentine with hopes you stay on my mind without that music teacher from Detroit Public Schools. So
There we go, Rick. Bring it full circle, son.
so there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
While we wait on David, did you catch any of the All-Star Game weekend? The slam dunk competition, 3-point, the skills things, or the game. I could only hang with the game for about a quarter because it was a glorified scrimmage and it wasn't really a lot going on. But Saturday night, I missed the skill competition, but I saw the 3-point competition and slam dunk. Slam dunk was won by a G Leaguer. Here it is on what is it?
Matt McClung.
What's that?
Matt McClung.
Matt McClung. Yeah, and it's a tweet that said, "Here it is, Black History Month, and a white boy wins the slam dunk competition."
Oh, wow.
I was like, really? So they're going off of that. But he had probably his opening dunk was probably the best dunk I've ever seen.
Is that the one? Which one was that?
It was where he jumped over two dudes, grabbed the ball, bounced the ball off the backboard, or he hit the backboard, then he jammed it through. I mean, to me, that was the best dunk I'd ever seen. It was better than Vince Carter's, which before now was the greatest dunk ever in that competition. But that one right there.
Guys that is coming out here.
Here we go. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. This is the one.
But well, go and finish.
No. But this was great right here. I said, number one, he's not gonna jump over these guys. He's gonna hurt himself on his first go round because it is like a little guy. Then he gets up there, roll, grab, backboard, boom.
And Skip at the end, he knew he had it.
Yes.
It's not his first dunk or anything. I understand he was like really great in college and known for his dunks in college.
Right. But I said, number one, I thought you could go straight up and dunk it, but no, he hits the backboard, kisses it, behind the head. All right.
Sweet.
They'll show it a trillion times there, and it's like, yeah, that, and he got a 50, and then you got Shaq up there with his mouth agape, because he couldn't believe it either.
He couldn't believe it. Yes, I like that little kiss there.
Oh, look at all these cats! Oh my goodness!
Reaction.
Yes, all the players are like, "Who is this cat?"
Okay, great dunk.
That's awesome.
And it was deserved a 50 exactly. Yeah.
Great dunk. The kid can jump out of the gym.
Absolutely. Every one of his
can't make an NBA roster. I just,
but you can find anybody can jump.
Exactly.
You can find anybody can jump. Roscoe Nance, our dearly departed friend, to talk about. You can find a jump shooter. You can shake any tree in America, find somebody who can shoot. You got to find somebody with talent, can play the game. There's so much more to it than just shooting the ball. Because that kid right there got more dunks in that arena than I have.
And hey, more power to the kid. None but love for the kid. But I just have a hard time getting excited about a guy that jumped out the gym and can't make an NBA roster. So
I can get excited because of that one.
But I assure you, I can go to Burston Fieldhouse in Flint. I can go to St. Cecilia's in Detroit and find some brothers that you just want to dunk the basketball. They will dunk it any which way you want. I still think there has to be a appreciation for the skill. He won the dunk contest, fine.
That was great.
It didn't excite me. Everybody else. Yeah, I guess I'm just an honorary old man now, David Steele. But I just I can't get excited.
Wow. You're an honorary young man, from what I understand.
Yes. But speaking of David Steele, let's bring in our guest at Tree. I will come back to you if you want to comment on this guy. But we are joined by one of America's great journalists. He's been doing it a while, more than 35 years now. David, you become an honorary old man too. One of the best in the business, though. I've had a pleasure of knowing him most of these 35 years. Mr. David Steele, he's worked at several publications, including Sporting News, Baltimore Sun, San Francisco Chronicle, Newsday, The National, and he has a great book out called It Was Always a Choice, Picking Up the Baton of Athlete Activism. David, welcome to You Get What You Get with Tree McDougal, Tim Turner, and myself. It is an honor to have you, sir.
It's an honor to be invited on again. I love being on with you all whenever I get the opportunity. And I love getting a chance to talk about this book because it's been a really big part of my life and a big part of what I do.
That's awesome. Just kick it off and let Tree kick it off there. I think you were eager to get in something in here with David here.
I am, but I was going to ask a question about some of the books that you've written. But earlier, before you joined us, Mr. Steele, and it's a pleasure to meet you. Ricky was talking about how a professor had influenced a musician, and I believe it was his high school musician. Who influenced you as a writer?
Wow, I used to write. I grew up just trying to read everybody I could. That was the biggest thing. I mean, I've been reading newspapers almost since I can remember reading it all. Even before I was reading, Dr. Seuss and all of that. I was out on the floor reading newspapers. But I mean, I read some people who probably I should be reading at the young age I was. I read a lot of James Baldwin when I was like 11, 12 years old. Read a lot of Richard Wright. And people like that. But in the business, I was really lucky to be around a lot of people who, I could sort of follow in their footsteps and see how it was done. Obviously, being alongside Ricky for so many years, he was one of those people. See the great things that he was doing for years and years and years. for people, but people like Bill Rhoden and Elmer Smith and Ralph Wiley, Michael Wilbon, Kevin Blackstone, and people like that. From my early days, Brian Burwell, and it's heartbreaking because some of the names I've mentioned aren't with us anymore, and you don't get a chance to thank them for being the influences and the friends and the role models that they were. But you read them, and you think that's the way I want to do things. That's the way I want to speak. That's the way I want to use my voice. And it's really been kind of a great opportunity for me to be able to do those kind of things and somewhat like the ways that they did.
Yeah. And I have a follow-up question. Out of the books that you've written, one about Colin Kaepernick and Tommy Smith, were those by design? Did you write those because of their personal stances, and they ultimately transcended sports? So, what was, why those two individuals?
Yeah, I was really fortunate with Silent Gesture with Tommy Smith's autobiography because when the opportunity came along to co-write that book with him, I was under the impression that so many years ago, I figured, well, I'm sure somebody's already written his life story. He's a giant in sports, in civil rights, in American history, in world history, in Olympic history. This is an image that literally everybody in this country knows about. I'm sure that there's just been volumes and volumes and volumes about him, and it really wasn't. Everybody sort of wrote around him. I never really did his story his way. And when I kind of got the opportunity to do that, I felt like, I just couldn't, I just didn't feel like I could pass it up. It's like, just to be in the vicinity and to sort of be in the orbit of somebody like him, and then for him to trust me to tell his life story, not just about what happened that night, but what led up to what molded and shaped him as a person, as an athlete. And it just, it was just too great an opportunity to pass up. And of course, having done that and being so immersed in it, that sort of led to this right here, just sort of telling sort of a broader history of activism in sports. Obviously, the thread of history runs through Tommy Smith and John Carlos. It ran through Colin Kaepernick several years ago, and it led to a lot of things that have gone on the last 4 or 5 years. In the realm of athletes using their platform to speak out and speak out on behalf of people whose voices weren't being listened to.
Now, you mentioned that you said you're talking about the activism of the last 4 or 5 years, but has it been the activism of the last 4 or 5 years? Because it seems like, you had the summit back in the day when everybody gathered around Ali. You had Tommy Smith and the other two athletes in Mexico City, and you had the summer of 2020. And it's been nothing since then.
Yeah.
It's not an exaggeration, though, is it?
It really isn't. And it's really one of the things that sort of stuck in my head as I was putting this book together. Because even as I was starting to put the pieces together for the book, and it started in the middle of 2020 when everything was sort of popping off all across the country and across the world, and just to see how the sports world sort of immersed itself in it, and really with the backdrop of what had happened with Colin Kaepernick and everything that he was doing, in the 4 years before that, what sort of stayed in my head was, all of this could change, by the time this book ever hits the shelves. And what we've kind of seen since then is that some of the things that people did held up, and a lot of it just kind of got pushed to the wayside for a lot of factors and a lot of reasons. Some of it's sustained itself, but a lot of it is really just kind of a memory of what went on 2 years, going on now 3 years ago. Feels like by the time we get to the next anniversary of how those protests and movements and uprisings began in 2020, it's going to feel more like a distant memory because so much was said about how this was going to change everything and how this was going to change the direction of things forever. And what we saw was a lot of factors that kept that from ever happening.
Hey, David, how much of the responsibility, falls on the black athlete. When we had all this going on, I mean, you know, Howie Long's kid can just go play football for the Eagles back in the day when all this was going on. But we need LeBron James to speak out. I mean, where is it where that we seem to always be riding this fine line, if you see where I'm coming from,
Yeah.
On this issue, and to the point where if a black athlete doesn't speak out, oh well, he's a sellout, and really, I'm always glad to see them do that, because I think there is a responsibility to come with a platform. But a guy in the NFL that's, maybe been there 5 years, but he's a middle tier guy in the National Football League, how much can he speak out without being reprimanded or even let go? I mean,
yeah, and that was one of the, to try to just pick a theme and pick a thread to sort of run with in this book was a real challenge, because everything you said is a really valid point. Part of the book is devoted to the athletes who, sort of expanded our entire view of how famous black athletes could be and how influential they could be. We talk about the Michael Jordans and the Tiger Woodses and all those players who became really literally global icons, international faces. They changed everything. They're well known in every corner of the planet. Do they have a responsibility to use that on behalf of everything going on in society, or should they have the freedom to just play, to just make money, to just become an icon? And I mentioned Jay-Z in the middle of that as well, because he kind of inserted himself into what the NFL was doing with Inspired Change, and how are they going to respond to the sort of activism of other athletes.
Did the check clear?
Hey, he's fine.
From the NFL?
He's fine. Everybody else, that's another story, but Jay-Z's good. Jay-Z, and this is you could draw a direct line from Jay-Z getting involved to Rihanna doing a solo halftime show on the biggest stage possible. In the meantime, though, who else what change really got inspired other than the halftime show? So, and that's something he touched on in the book as well. But he's in that sort of class. I mean, everybody who has that sort of visibility and has that stage, they have to make that decision. I mean, that's kind of the root of what the title of the book is about. It's a choice. You can choose to say, hey, like Tommy Smith and John Carlin says, look, I'm at the top of the world. I'm in a spot that few others will ever be in. I'll never walk this path again. If I speak out now, it could jeopardize everything that I've done, and it could just not wash it all away. They went ahead and did it anyway, and they did suffer some severe consequences. Colin Kaepernick did the Super Bowl. Being called like the next evolution of quarterback. A lot of what's going on right now, you can't have all of that without seeing what Colin Kaepernick did for those 3 or 4 years, when he was right there at the top. And he said, I can't stand by and not do anything about what's going on anymore. And they just literally wiped his career away. They just said goodbye. Not everybody has what it takes to do that. You look at the history, that's, again, part of what the book is about. There really has been a very, very small number of black athletes and a lot of other athletes in other areas, which could probably be 4 other books if anybody really ever wanted to do them, to touch on all the areas that are being really oppressed in the world overall, in the world of sports. But, it's still a really tiny number of all the athletes who have had that opportunity, certainly of all the black athletes had the opportunity. And that's why we can name them so readily, because they went out and took those steps and put themselves out there like that. And all the others really said, I'm not going to jeopardize what I had after what it took to get me to where I am. I'm just going to leave it alone. You go ahead and do that. You did it for a paycheck, but that paycheck is, is a big thing. It's those paychecks are life changing. Certainly now, those paychecks are life changing. So that's how they make those decisions.
I think about Mahmoud Abdul Rauf.
Yeah.
And the stand he made, I think it was 94, 95.
Right.
I mean, clearly he could still play in the National Basketball Association Day.
Right.
Clearly, Colin could still play in the National Football League. And clearly, their stances cost them their careers.
It did. It absolutely did. Craig Hodges, his name belongs in that.
Yeah.
You know, and they went with their hearts, and they went with their souls, and they went with, you know, they committed themselves to something bigger than making a mark in the sport that they grew up in, and they paid such a heavy price to get there. You know, and that's the thing we also try to remember that. You know, sometimes we do take it for granted as we watch these guys. You know, we just marvel at their excellence, and we sort of lose track sometimes of what it takes to get there. But you can sort of understand why they would protect that. But then when you see guys say, yeah, I went through the same thing. I made those same sacrifices. You know, I'm putting all this on the line. I want to secure the future for myself, my family, my children, future generations in this sport and otherwise. They said, and there's something even bigger out there that I need to take a stand for. And then they go ahead and do it. So, you know, I feel in a lot of ways, you understand why a lot of the athletes say, you know, hey, look, just be the greatest that ever lived. Go be the greatest running back who ever lived. Average too. Just say, you know, now that I'm here, I have an opportunity that's so rare that people are going to listen to me. Whereas, you know, just some other guy, nobody would ever pay attention to what I'm saying. I'm going to speak for all those people. I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity and speak for everybody that they're doing something that's even more rare than what everybody else is.
But seemingly, this narrative is what he was doing got twisted immediately. It wasn't so much his stance against injustice; it was an affront to America. I mean, it's like you hate the troops, you hate America, you're the Antichrist, and that wasn't all of that. It was the injustice of what was happening in 2020, and he had to take a stand. And I think one of his teammates did, who is invisible now. Is it Reed? Was his name?
Eric Reed.
Eric Reed. You know, that guy's on a milk carton somewhere after doing the deal with this with Cap. But nobody got the blowback that he did. You know, when people started kneeling, you got Trump calling people SOBs. You got Pence grandstanding at that NFL game in Indianapolis when he saw somebody kneel. They went to the game only to leave the game.
Right.
And it was, you know, all of this had nothing to do with what Cap was about. And he suffered probably greater indignity and injustice than anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, to see the backlash against him, you know, in the moment, you know, you knew it was bad. You knew the possibility of there being some tremendous repercussions, what happened. And you could even envision, well, they, like, as you said, they're going to twist this. They're going to try to call something outside of what it is. But he was very clear about what he was protesting. He was not evasive. He was not, you know, he did not make some sort of convoluted speech. He was very direct in his words every time that he was asked about it. You know, why I'm doing this. You know, and even before that, before he ever made the choice to make some sort of gesture during the national anthem, when he was on social media after all those police murdering Black people and getting away with it over that summer of 2016, you know, he was very upfront about it. There were a handful of other athletes that were upfront about it as well, but he was the one who said, I'm putting myself out there. I know there's going to be my career in jeopardy. I know that they're now going to just maybe spend the next year or so lying about it. He went ahead and did it anyway. And we see we're now, I think, 7 years removed from that?
Wow.
He hadn't played. He has not played since then. You've seen the quarterbacks that have played in this league in the last 7 years. And you can say that he does not belong in this league?
Right.
Every time I see Andy Dalton, I think of that. every time I see it, he's still drawing checks.
It's so many. The guy out in Chase
Daniel.
Daniels. Chase freaking Daniels.
Right.
And as we look at some of his highlights, you see the big playability he had with his feet, but he was a playmaker.
Yeah.
And
these all get lost to history, and it just shows you how quickly history can be erased or manipulated, because there are people who will walk around right now and tell you that he was garbage, he was nothing, that he was nothing special, that he rode the 49ers defense and did running game and all these other factors and all. That's how they ended up in the Super Bowl. That's why they were competitive all those years. That's why they did all that. As if these highlights that you're showing here don't exist. We can watch all of that. We still have Google.
Yeah, I was going to ask, but so we've been talking about Cap, but haven't seen much movement with black head coaches either. And so now you've got coaches that are suing the NFL. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's actually regressed. I mean, you talk about movement. The movement has only been backwards. And this sort of illustrates again. I mean, and it's it's all tied together in a lot of ways. I mean, this is what the NFL specifically, and what for the most part the entire sports world does when black people speak up about their plight. This is not even speaking up about the plight of black people in this country. You're speaking about the conditions in their own job. Again, this is the career they devoted themselves to. They're going out there trying to get these opportunities and trying to get to the pinnacle of their profession, just like everybody else is. And we see the raw numbers just hit you right in the face. There's no getting around it. There's not enough excuses in the world to justify what the numbers are in the NFL. And within the last 5 years, and it really again coincides with the sort of visibility that every black person in the NFL has had in terms of the way they speak out, the way they demand respect, the way they demand fairness and equality from the league, from the owners, from the commissioner. Whether you're a coach or a player, because I mean, let's face it, that's the biggest group of future coaches is the roster of players. The careers are short. They want to continue in the sport. They want to continue being part of it, so they become coaches, but they never can get all the way to the top. And now they've gone backwards. And now, Brian Flores and the rest of the coaches have sued the NFL. And the year after he sues them, one black coach gets hired.
D'Amico Ryan is the representative. But then the most galling thing was both Eagles coordinators got hired. And Eric Bieniemy has to run over to DC to prove himself. I mean, there are other coaches who had dominant. I mean, Bill Belichick called plays for his defense all the time, but his assistant DCs, they got head coaching jobs
always.
Nobody, and everybody says, "Well, this is Andy Reid's offense, and Andy Reid did all the work." Bieniemy was just somebody there, to pat guys on the butt when they come off to the sideline.
I'm sorry, Tim. And then the whispers come out. Well, he doesn't interview well, is what I'm hearing. He doesn't. We got a guy here in Detroit talking about biting people's knees.
Yeah.
So that has nothing to do with anything. And he may not be a great head coach, but he deserves the opportunity to get that shot to see what he can be. You look at a coach like Jim Caldwell. Took a team to a Super Bowl. He left Detroit with a winning record. They
blame Leftwich for the downfall in Tampa, and he was like gold until Brady came along.
Yeah. So, I mean,
that's the same way Giselle feels. He was gold. No.
Yeah. Tom Brady killed Brian Leftwich. Coaching career. Tom Brady.
And David and Tom Brady, he gets to be Tom Brady. I mean, he's the Brady bunch. He just gets to live his life, goes through whatever he goes through, He does not carry that burden. And then, but going back to the inspiration behind that book, I mean, I guess your years in the business, it probably just built up because you see it so much, and then it just explodes. I got to let this out.
It's probably that young reading too with James Baldwin and those people. The fuse was
Early
lit.
education.
Yeah.
It doesn't go away. So you hang on to it all your life. But yeah, I mean, again, it really, the evolution of it really was that summer of 2020 when more than maybe any time in my lifetime, at least, and I was like I'm practically a baby when, Tommy Smith and John Carlos did what they did. And, Ali, I remember, was post revolting against the draft and being kicked out of boxing for all those years. I remember like the Frazier, first Frazier fight. But before that, I missed all the stuff with the draft and all that. But my lifetime, what we saw in 2020, there really was an optimism that there was no way that this society could go back. It was like, there was a chance to like put an end to what was going on in the White House and the administration. People were really in the street, really unifying from across all races and ethnicities and beliefs, saying enough is enough. You cannot conduct yourself this way anymore. The athletes did it. They were doing it collectively. They were doing it in team sports. They were doing it in individual sports. They were taking stands. I mean, we watched the U.S. Open, and Naomi Osaka had the names of the victims of police brutality on her face mask in an empty stadium because of COVID. And she was wearing a face mask, and it had the names like George Floyd and Trayvon Martin and Sandra Bland, putting that out there in front of the world. Baseball players were kneeling and demanding that we will not play. We will step away from this sport unless you change stuff. They put out the NFL players put together this huge video to send to Roger Goodell. We're going to demand that you admit you were wrong in what you did with Colin Kaepernick and us, and you will take a knee and you will say the words Black Lives Matter on camera. And Roger Goodell did it.
Right.
What's happened since then? Again, that's another story. But
you got owners like, you got Jerry Jones, who's like, all my boys are going to toe the line at the national anthem. And you had McNair, he's passed now, the owner of the Texans, talking about the inmates running the asylum.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you an idea of,
mentality.
Roger may say that, and he's got a $40 million a year contract. He can say what he want to say, but I'm writing the checks for this team, and you guys, you hired hands will do as I will say.
Yeah,
that's the way it's being.
That's right. And again, I mentioned this in the book as well. His quarterback agrees with him. His black quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, again, and I you have to sort of really regress it. Quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. What position in this league is bigger with more impact, more punch, more visibility, more star power, more marquee, aspects to it than being quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, America's team, a black man, was on his way to this monstrous contract, and his response to everything that was going on, including what Jerry Jones said, was, "That sounds fine to me. I'm okay. That sounds."
Absolutely. Let me go to our comments section here. Ralph Rivers checking in said, "American is an expert at twisting the truth and or never acknowledging it in the first place. Ron the sanctimonious and his no woke agenda." I think he's talking about I know he's talking about the governor of Florida with that. And Ralph adds, "The rules continue to change. The name didn't change, but the game remembers the same guys. Used to be had to be a coordinator. There's so many young white boys in their 30s now starting new coaching trees. Rams, Bengals, Dolphins, Eagles. It makes me tired. I have to fight myself just to justify watching the NFL." and I remember at that time, a lot of people turned their backs on the Nats. And thank you, Ralph, for those comments. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate everybody checking in from around the country also. And by the way, I guess is David Steele, the author of the book. It's always a choice picking up the baton of athlete activism, but a lot of people turned away from the National Football League. But it's such a giant. It's such a. It's just a. The National Football League, David, is just a. It's Godzilla and King Kong rolled into one. I mean,
it is. It is.
So no matter what, it just keeps on going. So you can write the little things on the back of the helmets, inspire change. I mean,
little bitty signs on the post. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stop. I mean, what
so you'll be like me. You'll be like me, hate watching the Las Vegas Raiders, because I look at Josh Daniels, who's had 27 chances in the league and still stinks. But brothers can't get a job, and he goes everywhere, and their teams are garbage.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. That's the offensive thing. It's like, let's keep trying. We're gonna keep making this guy to be something special, and he's not. As of yet, he has not shown that he's special. But yeah, go ahead, Rick.
I'm sorry, and David looked like you were about to say something.
No, I was saying. I mean, that may be the ultimate example of what we're talking about. And again, all these things are tied together. He was the coordinator there for Bill Belichick all those years, and teams were just knocking the door down year after year trying to hire him. And he would just say, no thanks, I'll go back, for another year. Matt Patricia, we don't need to go very long, spend a lot of time talking to you, Ricky, about what happened up there. We couldn't wait to get him.
Hey, Joe.
We need to give him a chance.
And they fired Caldwell to bring him in.
Yeah, exactly. Fired Caldwell to bring in him.
Right.
Because they want to bring his people in. And there's just example after example after example. But again, we talk about Jim Caldwell. You talk about what happened in Detroit. And we talk about just coordinators in general. Because, we know the Eric Bieniemy story. 5 years, 3 Super Bowl appearances, 2 championships, can't get hired. Todd Bowles and Byron Leftwich, Super Bowl in Tampa, both coordinators, can't get a job the next season. Jim Caldwell took over mid-season as the offensive coordinator for the Ravens. They go on one of the hottest streaks ever, win the Super Bowl, doesn't even get an interview.
Steve Wilkes.
Steve Wilkes. Yeah. I mean, Matt. Now, first of all, Matt. Let's go back. Matt Rule signs a huge contract to coach that team, having never been a head coach in the NFL before. Did well in college. Bombs. Steve Wilkes saves the season, gets tossed overboard. Frank Wright comes along. And, after getting fired, the other place, he didn't have a job, and he gets and let's not forget, as the sort of the cherry on the top of the cake, it is who the Colts hired to replace Frank Wright. We all remember that. Jeff Saturday, out of the ESPN studio.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Only white man sitting at that desk.
But I want to go to
Freddie Moss sitting next to him. Ryan Clark, Mark Spears, everybody. The number of brothers left sitting around him. Colts reach in. He's our guy. We're gonna.
That's this guy. But when to my earlier point, the response when I was talking about what's the responsibility of Black athletes, I think part of that responsibility should fall on Black journalists, Black opinion writers, Black columnists to raise these issues. Going all the way back, I covered the Lions in the early 90s. I got promoted to columnist in 94. And really, the reason you mentioned Brian Burwell's in Detroit killing it. I said, Dan, maybe we should get a guy like this. Hey, Ricky. I mean, basically how it happened. But it is in addition to covering those. When I wrote columns, I felt a responsibility beyond who won and lost the game to also address the experiences of the community I represent. And back then, when I took over in 94, 95, as you well know, David and Tim and Tree, it wasn't very many Black columnists, out there. So those opinions, thank goodness now today, at least I see faces that look like me, even if they don't always, think the way I think, nor should they. But I think a lot of that role should have fallen on the Black columnists and opinion page writers and commentators. And I know, David, you have certainly held your end of the bargain up. But what do you feel that responsibility has been over the years?
We've seen how the business has changed. For one thing, that's a big part of this. We've seen newspapers, have changed a lot in terms of, their influence, their the responsibility they had once taken up to hire people. They didn't hire us in big numbers, but there was a period where the numbers were starting to grow little by little by little, and then all of a sudden, the way that the media changed, newspapers started to, start get smaller. They go out of business. They shrink their budgets. They shrink their staffs. Columnists are one of the things they eliminated, and of course, Black writers were among the people that they eliminated as well. So those voices weren't there. So you turn to the bigger networks. You see ESPN has 1 million people there. See, their numbers are pretty big. But you got a very obviously big mixed bag, as it probably should be. It should be kind of a cross section of a lot of different things. All the media outlets, whatever platform they take, they have a responsibility to cover things the way they should be covered. They don't have to be like fan pages. They don't have to just be constantly bound to management. They don't have to just do things for clicks all the time. They could constantly tell you what's going on in that world, making sure people stay informed. So you're holding your feet to the fire to people who have power. You're turning up the heat sometimes on the players when you need them, and you turn up the heat on the public as well. Say, look, don't just make this all about wins and losses and that sort of thing. It's like, let's talk about the issues that are actually going on. And this is one of them. I mean, if a player of Colin Kaepernick's stature begins to protest the way that he does, it's your responsibility not to just be some kind of parrot that says, "Oh, he's disrespecting the troops." Go find out what he's talking about. Go get a grip, get a grasp of where he's going with it, why he's doing it, the sacrifice that he's making, and write on that. Hear his voice, hear the voices that he's representing. Don't just listen to your own voice, and don't just listen to the people who are around you in the newsroom or above you. They're mouthpieces for their own ownership most of the time. Hear what's going on. Hear about the people. Hear the voice of the people that you're reporting on, that you're writing about, that you're passing an opinion on. That's the way you're supposed to serve the public. That's the way you're supposed to serve the audience.
I have a question for you, sir. There's a lot more symbolism than substance in the NFL. Do you think that's gonna ultimately change or just continue to happen? I think about when Ali, when he was Cassius Clay, everybody was hating on him, and then later he became beloved. So it's kind of a two-part question. Do you think anything will change, or do you think the attitude about Kaepernick will change?
Well, one of the things I mentioned in the book about Kaepernick is that it probably will follow, the sort of the Muhammad Ali pattern, where he'll be a hero in about 50 years, or the Tommy Smith and Carlos pattern, where he'll start winning awards, and they'll build a statue to him, and they'll start naming things after him. In about 50 years, where if they're lucky, he'll still be around to appreciate them. For Ali, it was almost, he barely made it to the end of that because of the different problems that he had, physically and neurologically, where he might not have really been able to appreciate the love that's coming toward him, because in his most lucid and loudest and most prominent stages of his life, he was the most hated man on earth. I mean, not just the most hated athlete, most hated man on earth. Well, in a certain context, because really the whole world loved him. It was just certain people in society that despised him. So we have to remember it that way. There's a lot more people who love Colin Kaepernick than hate him. But the people who hate him have the biggest microphone and the biggest, megaphone and just the biggest platform to speak out and put out and deride his thing. But I think one of the reasons to write the book is to sort of point out that the tables were starting to turn in 2020, because the refrain that we heard as we went through the whole George Floyd and what happened with that was, that's why he was kneeling. Colin Kaepernick was right. That's what he was talking about. And it had taken people 4 years and lots more heinous police murders, and the particularly heinous one caught on camera that nobody could deny any longer, before people sort of had the light bulb moment and say, oh, that's what you were talking about. It's like, no, that's what he's been talking about the whole time. So it feels like it's going to be worse before it gets better. I mean, literally, we're 7 years removed from 3 years removed from, the summer with George Floyd in 2020. And still at this point, the best the NFL can do is, like you said, write "end racism" across the back of the end zone and put "inspired change" on the back of the helmet. That's as far as they've got. If another player,
baby steps.
They're
not even baby steps.
Baby steps with cement boots.
It's like crawling, they're not even stepping. It's kind of being
but the thing with
pushed
Cap,
over
though,
the line.
Cap had a network against him. That's the thing you get. You have Fox News 24/7. We have the conservative media machine castigating this guy, and it's always, that's with anybody. If you're with us, you're fine. If you're against us, Tim Tebow can kneel for a different reason, for his religious beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Kaepernick can't kneel for what he believes socially. Those are the type of things. They're always talking about, keep your politics out of sports, but we can't start a NASCAR race without a flyover, or a football game without a flyover. We got to do seventh inning stretch. It's got to be "God Bless America" or something like that. So those things are acceptable. But when you have, dissent, or when you're speaking about how things aren't so lovely, this happens to Cap. The things happen to Tommy Smith. It happens to Ali. It happens to a Reed, where people get just like, they vanish and their careers are destroyed. So it's about the prevailing sensibility. Are you able to take, or like what it is with Fox, able to take advantage of a bunch of rubes who tune in and listen to that nonsense and run with it, and it becomes just toxic. Whereas if they would just listen to Cap's message and open their eyes to see what is going on, as opposed to
can't hear
looking
it.
at it, hear it, but they don't.
People
hear
are not smart.
That's their audience.
Right.
I got to read this excerpt from Ralph Riddle. I'll just go to. I applaud and respect Lovey for winning his last game and thumbing his nose at the Texans prospect.
He went for two. He knew he was going to be fired.
Yeah.
They gonna fire me
That's
anyway.
the job of the year. You're right. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lovey. He said,
Lovey said, "Oh yeah, okay. We see what's going on here. Okay."
I'm getting this W today. Well said, Ralph.
He said, "You want the first round draft pick? Not on my watch, brother."
David, I look at the National Basketball Association, and today in Atlanta, McMillan was fired.
Mm-hmm.
Guys are hired and fired all the time. No big deal. I think that shows some of the progress of the NBA. All it does, even though it still has its issues, that we've got to the point. I can't even tell you how many black coaches are in the league. But the activism is there also. The stuff LeBron does. I'm so impressed with what he's done off the court. Forget about what he's done on the court. I mean, I'm a much bigger fan of what he's done off the court. But some of the issues going on in the league today with the guys taking nights off, and the young man from Minnesota, Anthony Edwards, said, "Hey, man, why don't you just?" I'm paraphrasing. He said, "Hey, why don't you just play? Because these people work hard for these tickets. They may have come to see you play." Of course, Edwards is 21, not 31, and don't have. But what are your thoughts on that? And what are your thoughts on the accomplishments of the league itself, especially in regard to the black athlete?
Yeah, it's really been interesting about the NBA, and this is something that's been going on for years. They've always been so far ahead of the curve compared to all the other sports that it's sometimes you almost have to stop yourself and say, okay, we don't want to just automatically put them on a pedestal. We don't want to take everything for granted. But really, in the larger picture, they're doing things as close to the right way as anyone could even imagine. Because you're right. If a coach ain't doing the job and he gets fired, you don't always necessarily think, well, man, there goes the black coach. Is that really fair? Blah, blah, blah. Well, another way to get an opportunity. Because, somebody would. We know that over the last 20, 30 years that they do not handle that business the way that they do with the NFL, with Major League Baseball. And, they there's a sense that there's opportunities out there. You look at the Celtics, everything that went on with McDougal, just sort of holding your breath thinking, wow, how are they going to handle this? They elevated the black coach to replace him. He's got him exactly where they were at this point, actually ahead of where they were at this point last year because they had such a hot second half. They may be on their way to the finals again. They just gave him a contract extension, said he could stay, and nobody thinks twice about it. Yeah. They just, if a white coach comes along and he does well, Greg Popovich, Steve Kerr, who really at this point begrudges them the opportunity that they got because they know that others are going to get opportunities, and not be held to a different standard than what all the other white, you still see little glimpses of it here and there, but, not anything like what you see in all the other sports. So, that is something that the league has sort of gotten everybody accustomed to. You really do have to kind of applaud them for doing that. Plus the fact that they don't flinch anymore about building their image and their brand around black players. The NFL still has problems with that. They're still not sure what to do with black quarterbacks. Yeah. I mean, it's 2023. How are you still having a problem with that? But the NFL, the NBA does not, And so, yeah, they've got a whole bunch of other issues. You're right. And, I don't know what to do about the play because, as much as you want to see these guys every night, it's a grind. We talk about guys taking nights up, but we also see players missing months at a time with long stretches with injury. LeBron got hurt in the All-Star game. Giannis got hurt in the All-Star game. It's like the playoffs is where the NBA makes its money. That's where it really develops what it is. That's where it really shows itself off. Hey, All-Star Weekend is great. I want to see these guys in May and June. That's what I want to see them play. So,
I don't know what that's like in Atlanta, playing ball in May and June.
We'll never know. We'll never know.
I know about it less than y'all too. So. I had vague recollections of West Unseld and them guys. So.
Hey, we just got a few more minutes here on You Get What You Get, and we're joined by David Steele, the author of This Was Always a Choice, Picking Up the Baton of Athlete Activism. And you get that book just about anywhere. They sell books on Prime, Amazon Prime, or whatever. Also, Silent Gesture, the autobiography of Tommy Smith. And we hadn't talked about the book with Dr. Miles McAfee, David, Four Generations of Color. What was the premise behind that book?
Well, that was kind of an amazing thing, because I mean, what you want to do your whole life for the most part is that you really eventually want to write a book. And obviously I could have never imagined getting to this point where I've had a chance to write as many as I did. But back then, this was in the early 2000s. I was still at the San Francisco Chronicle, living in the East Bay, and I happened to come across and meet Dr. Miles McAfee, and our meeting just sort of came about because we were discussing Ricky Williams, and he was and Dr. McAfee was part of the agent representative team that Master P had put together. I was writing about Master P at the time, the things that he was there trying to do as an agent. Dr. McAfee was part of that package. I didn't know very much about him, and the more that I got to speak to him, the more I understood that he sort of intersected with a lot of Black history, not just in the Bay Area, but across the board. That he had been he had attended and played at Tuskegee, so he had that as part of his history. He had been an agent for Ricky Henderson. He had scouted in the major leagues for a long time. He was one of the few Black Division I baseball coaches at St. Mary's College out there in the Bay Area, and he had started to tell his story. And he said, "I would love for you to get together with me and talk about and tell my story." And I said, "Well, this story's never been told before. Let's talk about what you love and the people you've known and how you've gotten to know them and stuff." And it turned into Generations of Color. And it was the first book with my name on the cover. And got a chance to get that out, through the end of his life, and he passed about 10 years ago. And it's we ended up self-publishing it, but it's got it's the first thing I've done, and it's something that has recorded his life and has sort of added to the history of what a lot of us went through during the 50s, 60s, and 70s in this country, and it's particularly in baseball.
Okay, so what's next for you? What are you going to write next? Or can you tell us?
I kind of got a taste of it. So I literally spend the next hour telling you the kind of stories I would love to write about. The kind of books that I would love to do. I'd love to do another version of this book, honestly, and talk about some of the other areas of sports where we haven't had to even talk much more about that. Getting more women into sports. I mean, there's so many aspects of that. I mean, I devoted a chapter to the WNBA and the things that they did in terms of activism, but just women's entire breakthrough on the biggest stages of sports is an entire story in itself, going back to really Wilma Rudolph and Billie Jean King and just Zena Garrison, all those that sort of laid the groundwork for the women athletes and the platform that they have now, and the way that they've changed society and changed the image of sports. So, but again, that's one of the ideas sort of in my head.
And you mentioned women in sports, and the thing about it was that summer of 2020, it was the WNBA who was leading the charge.
Yes.
And then you had the crazy guy, Kyrie Irving, who was pretty much the leader of the NBA, which is, for all of his faults, that summer, he was in the forefront.
Yes,
and the WNBA was even beyond him. They were the ones who really got behind Cal and got behind.
And when we speak of athletes stepping up, how about Maya Moore and what she did in terms of just putting her career on, just stopping her career to take on something she thought was so important. The innocent projects of young Black men. Hey, Dave, before we go, you spent time in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, and we recently lost Bill Russell. Could you feel his legacy and the legacy of that team out there when you were there, and was it largely forgotten by the time you were there?
It was not forgotten. I would give the people there a lot of credit. I mean, he is still and always will be. I mean, I technically was born in Louisiana, but he was the son of Oakland. You know, McClymonds High School. I had opportunities to go out there and visit that school. I mean, McClymonds produced so many great athletes during that stretch of time, like the Veda Pintons and the Frank Robinsons, Kurt Flood, and all those kind of players. Coming out of McClymonds High School, and he was like royalty out there. And as far as like at the University of San Francisco, how game changing he was, and how he really is like the entire legacy in sports. I mean, there are a lot of great legacies tied to that university as well, but he loomed the biggest. And just the whole idea that he is the centerpiece of back-to-back national champions at a time when the sport was changing so much. You know, one of the things I really, really loved about the Bay Area is that they had a great love for basketball, a great reservoir of knowledge and history and respect for the game, for the sport, and for all the people who played it. That's why when the Warriors got good, and started winning championships and stuff, and people were saying, "Oh, they're a bunch of front-running fans, and they're jumping on the bandwagon," saying, "Y'all don't know what those fans are really, really like. They maybe love that sport in that area more than any of the sports combined." And part of that is the way they embrace and protect and preserve the legacy of Bill Russell. And I thought that was a really great thing to sort of witness while I was out there.
Hey, and USF Don, the great singer Johnny Mathis, was on the track team there.
Now that's news to me. I did not know that. Wow.
It's the same wow I got from Paul Robeson at Rutgers. When you were talking about that, I'd be like, wow.
Yeah, Johnny Mathis was on the track and field team, and he and Bill were good friends. See, I began the show with Michael Henderson taking us home with Johnny Mathis. I mean, it is Black History Month, right?
There we go.
There you go.
Hey, Dave,
Get what you get.
You get what you get.
Hey, this has been fantastic, man. We could go another hour, but instead of doing that, we're going to have you back to continue this important conversation. And I want people to know about this, your latest book, one more time. It's called "It's Always a Choice: Picking Up the Baton of Athlete Activism." Any final thoughts before you get out of here?
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what. We just saw two black quarterbacks in the Super Bowl, which I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. We just saw, the offensive coordinator of the Super Bowl champ get passed over, which I'm now getting used to. And we saw some little white kid out the G League win the slam dunk contest. So I'm not sure what's coming next, but
Hey, we just got a request from Carmela Brinson. Write a book about Brittany Griner. How about that? That's a great idea.
Honestly, I hope that there's like a bidding war to end all bidding wars for her story.
Yeah.
That she tops the ball. And speaking of the WNBA, that girl might still be in prison if it was not for the WNBA and those players and the players in women's college basketball and Dawn Staley and all them, because they never, ever stopped talking about that, even when people tried to tell them to stop.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it is.
They may have saved her life. Not even.
I mean, really, you got to come back because there are so many conversations we can continue to have on these issues. But we're going to get out of here. For our great friend David Steele, to McDougal, Tim Turner, I'm Rick Hampton. Peace, everybody. Have a great evening.
Good night.
Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.